Okay, hello everyone. This is so I don't have this much stuff to talk about this time, but I'm sure we can find stuff to argue about. So, as I was talking with Wookie earlier, that these days ARM is becoming very boring. A lot of stuff just works.
We even have graphics.
Where?
Welcome.
NVIDIA.
NVIDIA doesn't have X, so graphics. Anyways, so I was about to start with discussing about kernel. I think the good part is that things are mainline mostly, multi-platform enabled, device tree or ACPI. Seems very nice on the surface, but the flip side is that it's often half complete, even worse. So if people have ideas of what could be some important platforms that we should focus next to get better working in mainline. Can say a bit more louder.
96 boards.
Yes.
Yeah, high key.
The microphone's there. You hand people.
We heard him.
All right, I'm sure that high key will be high on everyone's priority. I've been told that it's mostly ARM IP anyway, so things should be just wiring together, but without the technical reference manual, how would I know? Of course, that's one issue that we should work more on, getting documentation public. From the bad side, often it's just especially graphics that doesn't work. So if you have a box that is just a storage device or Wi-Fi access point without any kind of multimedia, great. If you have a cell phone which has audio and video recording and complex panels, and well, it's going to be black.
Does Qualcomm refer to any particular board? Just an idea.
IFC, the cheap Qualcomm IFC board. Yeah.
Yeah. So Qualcomm is in progress on their end.
They're actually working with rock nowadays.
Yeah, not just on graphics, just in general. They're really making it. That's definitely getting a lot better.
Have you booted up the IFC with a mainline kernel?
Yeah, it's in Kevin's boot tests at the minute. And they're, it's active work, so it's getting their systems are getting better all the time.
So that one is also mentioned there, kernelci.org, which is the Linaro's work on with Kevin and Mark and the Lava team to have a nice web interface where you can see which kernels are booting with what def configs. There's the next and mainline and ARMSOC and so on. So now if things break, they are being caught up early.
So for the def configs, I know that Fadi has some
Trouble.
Oh, welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, maybe I'll sit over here, balance out.
I found him wandering aimlessly, saying, John, you need to be down here.
Yeah.
You could have just left him where you found him.
So I spoke to the Lava guys yesterday about the config issues, and they're saying if possible, either preferably is get the distro configs upstream, like in to kernel, whether it be docs or something. Failing that, email or send the configs over to them, and they'll start adding them to the builds.
The existing kernel CI currently just builds with def configs, so it doesn't test all the stuff. But Distro's kind of wanted testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the problem that the kernel developers like to have their kernel configs really slim, and the users like to have them really fat. And there is stuff that doesn't get tested. not sure, for example, does the multi-v7 def config enable everything that's needed by systemd for?
Nowadays it does, and the
Yeah.
64-bit also, but that's 319 RC5.
Yeah. But I mean, that's partly just telling people. So I mean, anything required to boot a SAE distro is probably perfectly sensible for a def config. You know, just for the standard def config. Never mind some weird ass distro one. Because that's the main use case is just something that will boot.
Would it make sense to have a collection of config fragments that you can just hand to kernel CI?
We've discussed this like almost every connect. So
Yes.
yes, the answer is yes.
Yes.
And I think the current status is please provide config fragments.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So if we just got some into the kernel tree, then there's something to just
Kyle and Mark can
build.
get it from us. We'll send it over.
Okay, so the question is, who are you asking to provide that, and who are we supposed to provide them to?
Who's
Are-
gonna
are
own,
you the
who
person?
owns this? And we're happy to provide.
That's-
Who wants to take an action item? Yay!
Yeah.
All right, so we send them to you.
Yes.
Okay.
We have 3 or 4 Git repos at Linaro with config fragments that all do different things for different systems.
Okay. So we send them to cross distro.
Sure.
What there needs
It's
to
not
be
like it's high volume.
there needs to be a process for consuming these and keeping them up to date because configs change actually quite frequently.
Yes. Well, the merged fragments is now in kernel, right?
That's been there forever.
That's been there forever.
So do we just send a one kind of a push to the mail list every time there's a config change, or
Probably just open up the Git repo, just send patches for review. It shouldn't be that much
Okay.
work.
Once
So-
we've got the concept in, it's just a matter of keeping the file up to date in the kernel.
So
Some
what and
branch.
yes,
somewhere.
yes. So
Which
make them,
branch?
if we're putting them in mainline, it's making them to mainline, or if they're going to kernel CI, it's putting them somewhere where
okay?
Kevin and Tyler and Olaf can pick them up from.
Can you harass us on a periodic basis? Not just
Sure.
us, but different districts to be like, haven't heard from you, because I'm worried that we'll send something and
Yeah,
it'll be
sit
great,
there,
and
become
then
5 years old. Yeah.
5 years time, people are like, oh yeah, you know, but Fedora's been doing it this way for the last 10
It'd be
years.
great to get something like every kernel cycle, like, hey, 319's out, send me
Yeah.
your 319 config.
Well, the point is, if someone doesn't reply, then that's a failure. There ought to be oh, we didn't change anything this time.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't need to be that up to date. I mean, it's better if we're testing the latest
nice.
thing, but just the concept of testing something vaguely complete is all we
Yeah.
really care about.
Yeah.
You can automate it by comparing the output of safe def config between the
Yeah.
runs. Because 3.18 changed networking. If you didn't pay attention, your networking was gone.
Yeah. Okay.
That's true. It will just break, I guess, fairly quickly if someone doesn't keep an eye on it.
I found that out on my router. Maybe it's not working anymore. Oops.
You guys talked about the command line thing already? Oh.
So, right. The next part, if everyone's happy with the kernel CI organ config testing, is the thing that was mentioned earlier this week on the cross-distro mailing list, that nowadays you can automatically detect the console, or the firmware can tell you where it is. And this doesn't seem to be any kind of public knowledge, because I hadn't heard about it before.
I sent an email to the cross-distro list when those patches went upstream.
Oops.
Picture shell file.
It's obviously a very boring email because it entered my consciousness. I know.
It's
It's
the
like
ST
we're almost using device tree properly.
the STD out property is the one you want to document.
It's
It's a really low volume list, Riku, so you could subscribe.
I know.
And not to be the ACPI fanboy, but the cool thing is, you know, I posted a patch that Torres on our side is cleaning up, but it's called the SPCR table, Serial Port Console Redirection Table. That one, it's the same concept, it's the same data, it's actually the same code paths in the UI probe code. Does the same thing, right? And there's a patch there, she'll clean it up. We'll have that posted and merged hopefully. And it actually, the same thing works on x86 if you care. So both device tree and ACPI.
So there's a bunch of actions here. Firstly, we need to submit to every single device tree that this is the serial port that is expected to be the console on this platform.
Yep.
And the second one is that we should get it automatically supported in the user space daemon that takes care of this, which I shall not mention by name.
That currently happens by magic with either of these.
Yeah.
So it already supports it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It knows what the preferred console was, and it registers based on the thing that shall not be named.
Right.
Provided you have enabled config f handle.
Which is a requirement anyway.
Yes.
So what was it in that context?
The thing that shall not be named?
Okay, yeah, that's my problem. What we're not
System.
naming. Oh, right, okay.
That's it.
Dev one.
The Voldemort demon. Oh, I said the word. Sorry.
There's something bad happened if I type system data.
Somewhere a system just crashed.
So we're about to end up with some arguing about that. Anyways. So we are happy about serial consoles as well. It works and it's boring. Page sizes. There's a
64K is the only way to go.
Yeah, give me numbers and arguments.
Has anyone actually benchmarked?
Not yet.
No.
For the record, I didn't put this upstream because I guess it's being recorded, so people will use it against me. But I wanted to go with 16K, but architecturally, 16K is optional, so optional doesn't exist, right? That's the problem. Because the Itanic went, another architecture went with 16K, and that worked quite well for server use cases.
It didn't work well for them for sales, but
But page size. I'm willing to say that was not the reason that.
Yeah, they don't tend to put that on the brochures.
And that's why they didn't sell very well.
So I think bigger than 4K is something that the server distros. You're right, numbers are useful. I think bigger than 4K was the way the conversation went. A lot of the hand-wavy metrics came from looking at things like the Itanium and PowerPC and so on, where people build 64K as the page
Right.
size.
PowerPC has really good reasons to go 64K, though,
Understood.
which is that their MMU sucks.
Understood. Not all the ARM MMUs are much better, actually. In fact.
Didn't Steve Capper have some numbers?
He's done some stuff around this, but he's not here this week, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Steve Capper has his page size in his bash prompt.
Is that a T-shirt right there?
He seriously does.
Yeah.
You'd be
Because
surprised
why
what kinds of
wouldn't
things just assume page size and then hardwires in.
Oh no, we
Put her a vest!
are not surprised anymore.
Partition.
so how many
Emacs.
software still has a hard-coded page size somewhere?
How much what?
How many software still have a hard-coded page
we
size?
might
We
know
fixed
that.
like 20 or 30 bugs and upstreamed most of it when we did our PowerPC port recently.
Brendan,
But
we
I'm
might
sure
know
there
that.
are plenty still hiding.
But scalely, there are places like file systems where if you make it with one page size, you then can't use it with a different page size, and that kind of
Butterfest.
Yes. It won't be the only one.
Actually, some hardware have kind of hard-coded page size.
What one?
If I remember correctly, PCI Express doesn't allow you for transaction to cross 4K boundary.
There's alignment.
No. If you do DMA transaction, it cannot cross 4K boundary. If you allocate by kmalloc from 64K pages, who guarantees you that your block will not cross this boundary? If you allocate from 4K pages, it will never cross because it's from one page. If you have larger chunk,
Sure.
It'd be the other way around if there was any.
and it may be other hardware.
Well, there are a couple of classic cases that I've seen. There's one with some of the firmware in these embedded cards. These network cards, for example, doesn't work well with 64K host kernels.
For most of the same reasons.
Right. And so we've got them to override their firmware to fix that. But yeah.
It just happens that PCI Express like it written in a stone.
So there's an assertion that latest bin utils will make 32-bit binaries work. How recently are we talking?
Yes.
I think it was announced this year, so it doesn't help for legacy binaries, but
So it
say
So
Docker?
5.
Doco.
Doco.
Oh.
Behind with yes.
Yes.
It's not patchable.
Another dangerous word.
This 225 Linaro patch, does anyone know?
No.
No, I see. This
Okay.
this is like the patches that just right?
So we can't assume, what we cannot assume for a very long time, that a random 32-bit binary is going to be safe on a 64K page.
It's not even a question of safe. They just don't work right now.
Well,
Yeah.
quite.
It's actually super safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best filling mode if it goes
So,
immediately.
It was
Is-
one of my motivations for going to 64K. I loved the idea of breaking all 32-bit.
Well,
And now we ruined it.
break it.
Yeah.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah.
So, is there a way that, is there an easy and obvious way, does people know of an easy and obvious way to pick up on binaries that will not work? What's the actual feature? What is the actual?
It's the start address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's dead easy to, Elf will just tell you, currently it's set to 32K, I think.
Yes,
And
that's the
therefore
default.
it just, and the first page has to be blank or spare for vectors, I don't know how we do it, something. So, yes.
Yeah, the load address has to be above 64 to work on 64 pages.
Fine,
Period.
yeah, okay. Fine, so we can trivially go through and scan existing binaries, so
Yes,
we can know when
it's very
this
easy.
is actually likely to work for people.
Yep.
So if we
And
pull this patch into binutils, and we completely rebuild our distro with it, can we then run the 32-bit distro on?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. So
So
once the
Fedora-
patch lands to your binutils, you can rebuild the distribution, and then you have 32-bit binaries work on 64K.
So there's a mass rebuild going through in Fedora right now,
No, not yet, but soon.
but there will be, right, for F22. So we could get this binutils patch in, rebuild 32-bit.
Modulo, a very small number of other things that don't work on V8.
Correct,
Like swap
but it's a
instructions, but yeah.
right, but it's a starting point. Yeah, well they can be but swap
Well, the
actually.
thing's on emulation coming
Swap,
up
yes,
first,
well, that's going to, stuff's all, well, kind of mostly going to be fixed insofar as it can.
Right.
Yeah, but swap,
Yeah.
there'll be some emulation there, right?
There already is,
Yes,
isn't there?
it's not all the emulation actually does what you might hope. But, because,
Just print some Wii on your console.
well, due to practical limitations, but insofar as it can, yeah, because we apparently have this massive set of Android binaries out there that people care about. So.
Yeah, Android.
There's swap, there's the
Thumb instructions.
set end and
Barrier.
barriers,
C15
isn't
barriers,
there?
yeah.
C15 barriers, which is a lovely one for the first time you come across it.
So, but the most of that I think there's a relatively short list of packages where that can be fixed up.
It's not a problem for any of the open source software because they are all being fixed,
That's what I
but
mean.
it's immediate. It's this proprietary crap.
But that's
So
not
it-
quite true. I mean, so there are things. What was it? It was the forked version of pthreads. It was something where a modern bit
for a
of
long time
Yeah.
was still using the
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
But that's been there.
Oh, it's been fixed, but
Yes.
so many silly
Old
people
builds?
have
Sure.
not just old builds, but they've also
Forked it.
embedded old copies.
Yes, they have. It was the MongoDB. There's a whole bunch of examples there where they copy. Yeah, yeah,
The copy in libgc until very recently was broken.
yeah. But we can. The point is,
We can find
we
all
can
this.
find them.
We'll fix
We'll
it.
build this. We'll run on 32. But when they run it on V8, it'll fall over. We'll fix it. It's just
Yeah.
a regular. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some.
There you go, Brendan. You get your 32-bit on V8.
Well, that's the thing, is
Please
that
enjoy.
I don't know how it affects the Debian distributions, but in Fedora, we're all native builds, and we'd really like to do a builder refresh.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
there aren't a lot of 32-bit ARM servers out there right now.
Yeah, we're going full 64 in Ubuntu soon as well.
Are you going
Right.
to use VMs to do builds for 32? Because what I want us to do is run 32
Oh.
VMs to do.
No, we're going to do 64-bit VMs, 32-bit sure. It's going to be all 64-bit kernels, 64-bit posts.
Do you
You know that if you use the 64-bit kernel and 32-bit userland, you get the uname M that gives you ARMv8L.
Yeah, so I'm really good at making sure that's not true.
Right, so this is my point. So we discussed this in Fedora of hacking up the aux vectors and the uname data that comes through and so on. But do you think that's safe doing the Chroot approach? Do you think that there's not leakage?
We do it for x86, we do it for PowerPC, why isn't it going to work here?
For a 32-bit x86, you build it on.
Yeah. We use Linux 32 to fix the kernel name because that's the only thing that matters to most configure scripts, and otherwise
Yeah.
it's fine.
That
Yeah,
gives
but
ARM8L.
Yes.
Oh, is that wrong?
Yeah.
ARM v7L is what you are usually expecting on
We
32-bit.
should fix that.
Yeah.
The 32-bit personality on V8 should say V7.
That's
No,
something
it
that
should
we
be
can
after
argue.
32.
No, it should say V7.
No, it's not. It's
No,
V8.
because there's a
It's a
32-bit
32-bit
V8
V8.
mode.
No,
It's-
because Linux 32 is not ILP32.
Linux 32 doesn't report i386, it reports i686.
Yeah, it does. But
Yeah.
that's still.
No, it's not
recorded.
V7 though, because V8 there's a 32-bit.
So-
these
ILP32.
missing instructions.
No, no,
So
no,
if
no,
you-
no,
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 it's
no,
separate
no.
completely.
ARCH
Oh, really?
32 is part of V8, right?
Yeah.
Right, so
Just
like
like
that's where the
okay,
instructions-
well,
few
we
things
could, we
missing,
could build
like
we could
swap.
build another personality and just
Right. Yeah, yeah. So my
Which
point is
might be
that needs to be
better.
fixed up, and then also the stuff like if you are building a 64K page, this is an issue for us. Okay.
Sure.
If you're building a 64K granule size, and then you're building these 32-bit, what you really want to do perhaps is have them compile what they think the page size is 4K. Right? Because you're going to want to run those binaries on V7.
So if your build is actually making decisions based on the runtime page size of your built daemon, your software is broken.
Agreed, but I think there's packages that do that.
Sure, I'm sure there is software that does that and it should all be fixed.
So my
I would
point-
rather actually find the bugs.
Understood. This will be great for finding bugs.
Yeah, but yeah,
isn't-
possibly you're right. Possibly you should
But
fix the
isn't
page size.
masking that you're on a V8 system because maybe config.guest needs updating also the case that you should be
It
updating
is,
the packages?
And maybe in the ARM case we could actually eat it and fix the bugs. The reason that we never tried in the x86 world is because so much software is so shit when doing detection on x86 machines.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we should look at fixing it, but we may also need we've discussed this previously actually, but we may also need to have a really good set of lies around, it's V7, it's not V8, there's a personality there for V7, and you lie about the page. There's other stuff that's going to leak through.
Didn't we just have a massive discussion about all this whole using uname to configure things and what we're going to put in?
Right, so using
Wrong
uname to
things.
configure things is always wrong anyway.
Exactly.
It doesn't stop people from doing it.
They'll do it.
Yeah.
They'll do it till the rest of the time.
But, maybe now's a good time to go and improve the world a bit.
You're such an idealist. I
I
love it.
know I am.
Oh
Why
man,
don't do things
so
properly for a
cool.
change?
Speaking of uname, why is the AR64 written by a monster truck announced? That's the uname and says AR64, AR64, AR64.
It's really AR64.
Yeah.
It's just in case you weren't quite sure.
that depends on your build of uname and what distribution you're running. You always get the architecture 3 times on ones that don't fill that in with something different, like Red Hat rules or whatever.
It's Red Hat Rocks okay, actually.
I think OpenSUSE and Debian do the mayhem uname.
we sure do.
So it's a bug in
You
util
only
Linux
really know.
basically.
What, Util Linux?
Util Linux, that's where the uname comes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really awesome on longer architectures because you get yelled at seriously.
Supercalifragisticexpialidocious. It's V8.
Right. So also it was mentioned booting 32-bit virtual machines on 64-bit machines. Is there interest on it? Or is
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say
Say
there
that
would
again.
be.
Putting what?
booting
32
32-bit
VMs.
kernels on?
Well, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like for our builders to be built with 32-bit VMs.
In fact, you can do it right now, but you don't get KVM acceleration, which makes it not very useful.
Yeah, not so good. Well, and yeah, that's one of the reasons we're not even looking at that right now. If someone's going to do 32 on 64 KVM and make it work, that would be nice too.
I know it's been discussed, but I don't know if it's very high on the priority list of KVM developers. We have a Xen person here. Do you know anything about 32-bit kernels on Xen on 64-bit ARM machines?
You just pull an answer out of my beer.
Hey, try this. Try this. It should work, and
But-
I'm going to fix it when it doesn't.
Yeah.
Try that answer.
It did used to work, and I would fix it if it was broken.
Oh, cool. There you go.
Cool. So everyone
Switch
everyone
our
use
system
Xen.
to run with Zen.
Zen. Drop KVM.
Go on, you send that email. You send that email. Go on. I'm not sending it, but you send it.
I will send that email to Dev Null. You got it.
Yeah.
April 1st, you send that email.
Well,
I'll send it April 1st. It's fun to see the feedback.
so there is
Do we know it's
a
broken for
certain
KVM?
amount
Yes.
of commercial pressure on running 32-bit VMs, 32-bit kernels.
But getting valid context and data points
Well, I think
is
it's
slow.
I think it's very useful. If you look at people running, you know, if they may be running even an Android virtual machine, right? I think that's a very strong use case.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of the cases specifically for distributions that do native building, because there will be no fast ARM-v7 or 32-bit hardware to do builds on in future.
Right. That's certainly our interest, and we do native builds with under KVM today. So.
Fine for graphics.
Who's on the hook? There's two pieces needed there. There's some tooling needed to handle the sort of root use case that we were just talking about, right? So is there anyone on the hook to help make that? I realize we can all do this together and we'll hack things up for different distros, but is anybody on the hook in Linaro to own that or get that working?
The personality thing.
Yeah, but not just that, but you know, any other associated root mess required to lie about what you're running.
Well, I can take that one now since I'm looking on doing those 32-bit builds on 64-bit machines.
Okay, cool. That's good. And then for the KVM part, do we need then to maybe go back through one of the groups, like LAG or something, and make it a request?
I think there's a KVM futures session tomorrow or on Friday, and
then we'll bring it up. Okay.
right, serial console is all nice, but at some point you want to see some rotating gears.
Really? Yeah. Oh, it's not server, okay.
Not on servers, perhaps.
Rotating your server.
As long as it's ACPI powered.
So for DT we now have simple FB. Does EFI FB work on such platforms?
We don't really have any platforms we care about that have video out.
Okay.
Yes.
So that would be a no,
Ikey.
Ikey, yeah.
Especially because we've got no proper graphics, so the framework might become quite interesting.
Yeah, but it's Hikey is EFI plus DT, so that can use simple FB. So that
Okay, right.
for ACPI platforms with, well, no, it will always be DT, because if you have ACPI, you will probably have same graphics.
So ACPI just implement the graphics using ACPI methods. No, I'm just checking. That would be horrible.
You probably have PCI or
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, I don't know, because for Ikey, I'm looking to get ACPI tables made for it. So I think if I have my evil, nefarious way, right, they'll all boot that way as well. But you just don't get graphics.
So if the kernel lacks graphics drivers, simple FB is really nice. You have your bootloader just poke the graphics hardware and tell the kernel, this is the region, this is the format, draw. That will give you installers on basically everything with graphics and where you can poke stuff in a bootloader.
All these chips do still actually provide a simple frame buffer that you can expose that way.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
We
So
need to.
that's the stopgap measure for all Rhino is using that right now, because Luke keeps saying he will write the proper driver and never does, and people still wait for him. So that is a stopgap measure, but for the rest, proper DRM drivers is the answer. And the second thing, it says, do DRM modules still need to be built in? It's better to have them built in. The question is the reverse. Do they still need to be modules? Because the last time those were brought up, it's like, yeah, but on x86 we do it as modules, but they need to be done as modules because they were written by badly trained bootloader monkeys and needed to they load their firmware when you would load the module instead of when you use the graphics driver. So Rob Clark says, I written my driver the correct way, you can build it in statically, and that's a lot better. So
Oh, so you're saying if you build it in, it tries to load firmware very early and fails. And it
yes,
says,
on
oh,
x86.
I'm screwed.
Yeah. So if you fix the x86 drivers to load
okay.
firmware on device open instead of on load, then you
Or
can
just
build them all
retry
in
or
and
whatever,
everything works nicely. You don't need Ingram
Are we
FS.
going to want DRM drivers built in for everybody? The server folks are just going to be wasting memory with it.
Yeah, we want it in modules, yeah.
Yeah, I think from a generic kernel standpoint, you think it's better to build everything in because you built one thing in. We build everything in if you tell us to build everything in, and that's bad.
So right now there are like 5 DRM drivers for ARM.
Sure.
There'll be
In
50.
theory, there could be more because someone might actually write another one.
Yeah.
I hear there are more ARM associates than that.
Do you think he goes to a special place to get these humorous retorts all the time? Or
Yeah, it's called England.
I've never been there.
Okay, so libdrm has now taken a bunch of these supports inside it, and at least these ones need to be enabled, and probably more in future.
I wish libdrm had a build everything option, but yeah.
Could that happen?
So libdrm is user space access to the DRM functionality. Spot the menu knows nothing about graphics. I've recently learned that DRM doesn't always mean digital rights management.
Now this is very confusing to me as well, so we would need to have Tom Gall here to explain us.
Okay. But what do we care? What's it?
We need the libdrm at least on the way to have the gears rotating on our screen.
You need it for, yeah.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, they all need to be built.
Xorg 1.17 will make life a lot easier for us because they don't triplicate the data for which driver needs which card and etc. So less work for us. By the time we get working graphics drivers, X will just work out of the box.
So never.
The question is also, will X exist at that point, or will have everyone has gone to Wayland?
Well, we're still
Yeah.
talking about 32-bit Android binaries, so X will probably never go away either.
Yeah, it's all right. It's perfectly acceptable.
I heard Wayland was dead, so.
Long live Wayland.
So we're talking about Xorg and Wayland. What about Mir?
What about it?
It's a space station that crashed in a fiery death into the ocean.
I don't think a mere discussion needs to happen here. We have our guys talking to hardware guys to make sure that the things they want to work, and I'm fine with staying right the hell away from it.
No, I wasn't trying to do a troll about Mir, but
Well, everyone else was. So.
For once I'm trying to say
I'm
space
hurt.
troll things.
I am hurt deeply.
Really?
Yeah.
'Cause I could hurt you deeper.
It's the pumps.
I can put you in touch with the people you should be talking to if you're actually interested in your sport and what they need and if they need anything from you. But there's no one in this room that has a clue what to say, so
Okay.
we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, presumably people use whichever graphics frameworks they use, and the libdrm stuff means that should just work on the hardware. That's how it's supposed to work, right? So is that hope so optimistic?
Someone has to write the bits.
Which bits?
Well, the bits that are platform specific. libdrm is not magic.
Right, okay.
It should be.
It should be, yes. It should just discover it all. Go, look, there's a video device of some sort. Let me hack some code. 5 hours later, you boot it, and the little gnome passes out.
But the next time you boot, it's really fast.
It's like one of those little Discworld cameras. There's a little pixie inside. Things really fast.
So essentially it seems we don't have much of the, we have interesting graphics, but the people who actually know how it works are not here, so.
Again.
Yeah. It's a RESTful API. You submit the request on Move. The whole team in China go and write the driver and
then they
supply
rest.
it.
Pixel appears. We don't know.
Right, so on to the programming languages and applications that are still missing. Personally, I've been feeling around Golang, and fortunately it seems that finally someone is actually porting it.
Yes, it is in progress.
And the Git tree is public. It's not in the main Go tree at the moment, but it should hit Golang 1.5, which freezes in May for a release in August.
We take the.
You're very helpful, man.
So then we will get
Shall I
the
go now?
other word that we won't talk about working.
So we take the philosophy. Do you want to summarize this?
I've got just two other things on this topic. First one, GCC Go in GCC 5 can also be used to build and run Docker.
Yep, works great.
Yep.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
It's functional.
Works fine.
Yes, it's functional.
Our philosophy is we're leaning towards GCC Go as the way to run Docker.
Well, it's a little more
It
nuanced
is
than that.
nuanced, but,
We are leaning toward following what Upstream does, but we really wouldn't mind if Upstream used GCC Go.
Yeah, sure. The issue is GCC Go lacks some of the semantics that GC Go has. So you're not going to get all the shiny features, and depending on how...
For Docker, that's pretty much a non-issue.
Have a look at GCC5 first.
Yeah, it's actually tracking really well. And I sent you a PDF with all the information you need with the latest. I did so. It was like 2 hours ago.
Nope. My watch says no.
If anyone else is interested in using GCC5, we have a handy PDF we can share with you.
Cross distro.
Cross distro.
Yes, please share.
send the list.
So does a bit of patching need to occur to make this buildable with GCC Go?
No,
Or
not with GCC 5.
okay, right.
The only problem is it's GCC 5, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
So
Yeah, with
that's applicable already. Fixed.
yeah.
So now I just have to go ask our toolchain team to enable GCC Go in the GCC 5 they build.
That's nicely you will do it.
Please.
Can you?
By the end of today, thank you.
Okay, so I just had one other thing for this, which was there's some interaction between V8 and MongoDB and Node.js. And I think some people have sorted it out,
Yeah,
but it's
a mess.
So...
Can you explain it without drinking?
No. Mongo are in the process of doing a mass rip out, replace, God knows what. So it's not that high on their priority list at the minute, unless somebody like Red Hat can exert a large amount of pressure. So timeline for Mongo, I don't know, and it's going to be a hell of a lot of patching to get that working. Node.js, so the dev branch of 0.11 does work. It has a recent enough V8 engine in there. IOJS, which is the fork of Node, also has the correct version of V8 engine. The only thing with IOJS is that it's makefile, needs VA added to it. So it's not a massive amount of work for IO, it's just still some work. But IOJS is much more amenable to external patches than Node is.
Node has its own foundation as of yesterday.
Yes, it does.
That's going to solve everything.
I shall refrain from comment.
Right.
You just commented.
But there'll be a whole bunch of them next week at Collab Summit, I'm sure, as a result, because it's Linux Foundation. So we could have a conversation with them about it. That's where I was going.
So yeah,
Some kind of technical summary then of what's needed for. Is anything needed for Node.js at this point?
a release. Yeah, basically. So the .12 release should have everything needed.
When's that due?
They don't publish any roadmap. It's
It's done when it's done.
Okay. So that's an easy one to ask, right? Okay.
so yeah.
I will ask them next week. And ask them with a stick.
Please do.
Yeah. And for Mongo, you said it's just.
Mongo are replacing large chunks of components, and then the V8 engine would also need to be updated.
Okay. that's just a lift to a newer version.
I don't know about you guys, but we hack and slash Mongo and Node to actually build against an external V8, so we really like it when they're in sync, which currently they are, but they may not be down the road. Or close enough to in sync. There are a couple versions out of it works fine.
I believe something
That should
similar
be
has
where it'll be.
been done with Fedora on our end, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did have an external V8,
Yeah.
and then it was just too much headache,
Yeah.
way too much headache of
Worked okay for us so far.
patching
Not
everything.
V8 's supportable regardless, but you pretend.
Yeah.
That's V8 the accelerator, not the architecture. The
Yeah.
architecture's one.
Yeah.
We were just drinking too much beer to try and get over the headaches. It was just, okay, we're running out of beer. Stop. So, yeah. Yeah, we've got quite a few more bottles turning up
So you're
as
not out
well.
of beer.
Yeah, but
Presumably, no one has appropriate contacts or Google who are pushable enough to say, will you please fix the LibV8 mess?
but the mess isn't theirs. They'll turn around.
Not a mess.
It's not
everyone
it's
else's
not their
version.
fault. They want to embed their own version. Up to them.
But in terms of a more static API, so you've actually got a chance
Isn't
of
a bit of an
using
API definition problem
external-
as well?
That's not web scale.
I know.
that is fair. Their API is clearly unstable.
Yeah.
As are their developers. But the big problem is everybody embedding their own copies. Because if they weren't doing that, that would push the V8 developers to give them a stable API. It's
Yeah.
sort of a
That's right,
circle,
they
right?
embed them because it's not stable, and they
So-
go,
And
well,
then
we
it's not
can't keep
stable.
up, so we'll pick one.
So we could make some serious progress on Node because of these changes. We could actually harass them to have a commitment as to when there'll be an update. That seems pretty straightforward as a quick thing. And then the Mongo thing is just, I don't know what to take away from what you're saying. It sounds like that's a period of time. That's
Yeah, and I couldn't get any commitment from people I was speaking to.
okay.
Can't we just convince everyone to switch to something more reasonable than MongoDB?
Yeah, I'm down with that. Good luck. We currently just build it without the V8 support because it turns out most people don't actually need that anyway. Only on ARM64, mind you. We built it with V8 support everywhere else.
I think
But that's a
the same.
hackish workaround for us right now. We would like to stop doing that.
That's what we did for the Linaro initial builds of Mongo as well, this civil V8.
Mm.
No one complained.
No one uses them.
Exactly.
It is a used feature, but it's not a commonly used feature.
Well, MongoDB was a checkbox anyway. Can we build
That's what I mean.
MongoDB? Yes, okay, done.
Yeah, nobody uses Mongo anyway. So.
You turn off all the features, you can build anything.
Andy, did we say that Mono is now done? In fact, we're just waiting for it to be upstreamed. Is that the demonstration?
I think we have a functional model.
Yeah, well,
Is it in fact now we're just waiting
Joe
back downstream again?
Joe Shields has managed to build for all the distros.
Right, but is it?
But
not
it's
upstreamed yet.
no, I'm not sure on the status. There were some.
He's only just been setting up a build farm in the last week to
Yeah.
be able to do it repeatedly.
Right.
Yeah, that-
Actually, no, I don't have it for ARM64, so
No.
clearly I need to sort that out.
There are some issues, some legal issues that in play. So how long it takes to sort those out, God only knows.
But we assume it will eventually. Just don't know.
That is the desire. But seeing that come to fruition, I don't know.
Has anybody got any traction on GHCR yet?
Not seen or heard.
Yeah, all we've got the naive, icky, not fast
Exactly. So there is
they're
an
calling
interested
it,
chap
which
who
is fine.
said yes, that we'll do that one day, sometime
Well,
maybe. Any
To be honest, just get something functional. Let's not worry about how performant it
Anybody
is.
got a friend in Glasgow? that-
Well, GHCI actually requires you to do a native port, that's the problem. GHC, you can fake it.
Yeah.
GHCI requires a native port to run the interpreter.
There's a pile of stuff that has to have the extra bit.
Who owns that?
So my understanding is GHC 7.8, this is loads easier than it was in the previous one because they've rearranged, you don't have to do anything like so much porting work. So the internals are much better, but it still doesn't actually build.
Who owns it? Who owns this in Linaro? Or
I don't know.
Nobody.
I'm not sure anybody actually cares that has money. Yeah. Debian cares because there's hundreds of Haskell packages and they don't build, so my list looks bad. But I'm not sure that anybody's actually using that software. So And it sounds like the Haskell people will do this eventually, especially if we give them some IQ boards or something.
That's probably the answer.
I think that's
Oh, thank you. That is the answer, isn't it?
probably.
Just get them some boards. Fedora guys, I mean, they go nuts with Haskell. They fix it eventually. You just need to, hardware's the answer.
So I think it'll get done eventually. It's just
You know what? To make that go away, yeah. Here's a few $100. Go buy yourself a real computer.
I've tried that before, that doesn't work.
So there are a lot of other open bugs across this whole bug tracker.
Yeah, there's some 40 or so.
So, what, I mean, GHCI is one of them. I think another one is the one for FPC. So what about if somebody goes through this list and then contacts the upstreams and sends them an open 96 board?
You volunteer?
I said somebody from Linaro. Or a Linaro member.
So I can check this if it's possible. I need to find out from the Taylor Steve that if I can get some boards for that purpose.
Can we get a refresher to the cross-distro list for the bug tracker, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen quite a lot of comments along the, well, there's no hardware, how are we supposed to fix anything? So I
Yes,
guess
which
I
has
think
been a very valid argument until recently.
Yeah, so I think there are people out
No,
there
it's
who,
not.
given cheap hardware, will actually get stuff done.
Did we answer? Someone was going to check today. I didn't check this in Hikey yet. If it has the CRC and crypto extensions.
It does.
It does.
Yeah, I checked it, and the CRC and the S8 crypto extensions were there.
Both there. Okay, cool. That's just good to know because there's a lot of optimization code that'll help. Good.
So related to the mono, has anyone checked the Microsoft's own implementation of .NET, if that is portable to ARM v7 and ARM v8? Does anyone care?
I'm sure there are people who care, but I'm not yet.
I mean, it's still more nice environment than Java. No Java people here to get angry.
Not a bad idea, but it's probably a different forum to bring that up.
Booting.
So booting, is there anything to discuss? Everything is solved, right?
Everything's EFI, CPI solved.
Except for the licensing of Tiana Core.
Oh, that's true. Bloody fat driver, who's fixing that?
The X-Fat thing.
Someone said. Is that right?
We were thinking about it, but then
No, we haven't actually yet.
Someone started
We thought
hacking
better of
something,
it.
but
Okay.
Booting is a bit vague. What do we actually mean?
are
with
these
booting?
microphones live streaming right now?
No.
It's,
You can
I
only-
believe it's
you can only
recording, but
record.
not streaming.
Is the guys recording it here right now?
He arrived here and put it on and disappeared. I'm not sure if it's on.
He did
The
say-
following section will be redacted from the video before it's posted online. End of redacted section.
Someone came up trolling somewhere about the SPCR and patents around that.
Following
But
section.
yeah,
No.
think about it. It's just that the patents expiring doesn't help, right? Because it's the license that's the problem with the Tiano Core VFAT driver.
Yeah, but implementing a new fat driver is like an afternoon's work.
Okay.
People
Yeah, but someone
didn't.
still has to do it.
People didn't want to touch it for various reasons,
Yeah.
right? And it will now be something that Linaro or somebody can do, right? So
Hands up anyone here who hasn't written a fat drive before.
actually, I haven't, but I have hacked on the floppy disk code in Linux.
I have debugged one.
Yeah, close enough.
Yeah.
okay, John, can you cover SPCR really quick?
Okay, so the following section, SPCR, there was someone who came up trolling. I asked our guys to, I'll put this nicely because it's being recorded. I asked people to ignore the trolling and just not bother replying to it. Microsoft have a community pledge promise for these licenses, and the summary would be, they probably don't use these videos against me later. I've talked with Microsoft a bunch of times about this. They've checked with people internally whether this is actually something we can do. If there are any issues, there are no issues, and some very senior people there are cool with it. So they have a pledge that says we're able to do this. There are people there who will back us up if needed. I don't think it's an issue. If it becomes an issue on LKML, then we can go and get whatever further additional clarification is needed. But I think it's just somebody who doesn't like Microsoft ranting about, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Serial port and console redirection? That's SPCR?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a table that gives you data in ACPI that's similar to the chosen standard out stuff. And actually, it's been present on pretty much every x86 server for the past decade, because it's part of the Microsoft WinQual requirements. So once we have code there, magically, you know, early con stuff will be automatic on x86 as well. So yay, they get to win.
So that's the same thing, which that's the firmware automatically set console.
Yeah.
Right.
Same code, same as device tree.
But that only applies if you have ACPI.
Well, device tree has the chosen standard out
So
path.
device tree, right, they're both effectively
So
the
so
same.
effectively, a server that contained both sets of data would magically do the right thing. But the specific trolling thing that came up was related to the ACPI table.
We're rapidly running out of time. Anything else on booting?
There's one thing which I don't know if it's an issue anywhere else. It was an issue for Debian. The EFI vars interface. There is a legacy interface, and I won't say which path is which because I always get it wrong because it's not logically named. But sysfirmware EFI vars and sysfirmware EFI vars. One of them's automatically part of /sys, and the other one is an actual file system which you'd need to mount there. The actual file system is the one that isn't legacy and horribly broken and based upon a pre-1.0 version of the UEFI spec. The EFI vars library that actually sorts the whole mess out and just makes it work will fall back to the ancient interface unless that pseudo file system is mounted. So make sure you build that file system and make sure you mount it.
It was really, really not clear until very recently.
Voldemort in it auto-mounted.
So that's basically
Well, of
Okay.
course it does, yeah.
that's an EFI build option, basically how you built your EFI.
No, it's a kernel. It's a kernel build option.
Build option.
The thing that we have that does things, that daemon that starts software. and
Thing that shall not be named.
That thing does mount it, so it is there. Can we get you on video doing that? In your bikini? With pontons and some coconuts.
Right, I see we are running out of time,
We're all trying
but
to avoid talking about ILP32, so
You wrote ILP32 on the bottom.
continue.
I want to hear
Don't
IP32,
scroll down.
please.
If you
I
don't
want to
scroll
hear
down,
arguments
yeah.
for and against.
Against?
Yeah.
My-
Oh God, another port.
We
Yeah.
don't particularly want to do it unless someone's got a really good
Well,
reason why we should.
I don't think it's going to happen on our end because
For distros.
it hasn't been done for x32. People have cobbled things together. There's no x32.
Exactly the same thing.
Are you going to do? I mean, someone will build it, but will they maintain it? No.
Exactly.
We
So
get-
it may achieve unofficial port status, but
We're being prodded every now and again for people who want it. Specifically, the networking guys are really,
Yeah.
really keen on it.
There's some people don't want to forward port their 32-bit or
Right.
32-bit software that they are too terrified to touch because it's horrific. But they do want the ARM v8 niceness.
So my answer is
Even
containers.
better, they want it big endian as well.
so big endian ILP32.
So use a container. Someone somewhere, it doesn't have to be any of the standard distros, could be open embedded. One of the conversations we had yesterday was about that. Someone could build
Yeah.
something and you can run it inside a Cheroot
That's-
or a Docker
But
container.
that was what I was going to go on to. Everybody I've talked about it is that's what they're wanting to. One of their ideas is they're going to build this specific thing.
Yep, do that.
What about that silicon vendor that doesn't do 32-bit instructions on their 64-bit ARM chip?
Cavium.
Yes.
We can say that out loud.
But it will require EAB extensions, right? So first you have to go and define it in EABI. And that will be the first thing I would say, like before distros go and
Yeah.
start using it. So
Yeah,
you have to,
we need to get the ABI upstream. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, our master plan, once it's upstream, for Ubuntu, that is probably not Debian, is to just do a multi-lib toolchain and stop there.
Yeah.
And if someone pays us a ridiculous amount of money, we'll do a full port, but we're certainly not planning on doing one.
Right.
Okay, so when people ask, we direct them to you.
Absolutely. If someone wants to throw a bunch of money at you and you would rather we have it,
actually, when it comes to that, yes.
If you're willing to take one
For all
for a team
people
like
talk
that,
about this,
okay.
it's not something any of the general purpose distros are interested in. I think
Yeah.
we
Right.
broadly
So
agree.
can we note that down somewhere? Because what keeps we keep getting people come to us saying, "Oh, you should do it because Debian's going to." And I'm like, really? I don't think anybody is going to actually do this.
We agreed this at the last Linaro Connect in this equivalent session.
If you're running a general purpose server or system out there, and you've got legacy code, fix it and port it properly. There we go.
It's free software. Anybody can build it if they want to.
Yeah.
But we're not making an official port without
we're
a
not
whole
gonna
load
do
of
it for
pressure and people volunteering to look after it.
Could we feedback to Linaro then perhaps to do the whole container? Someone needs to do a pretty demo somewhere that shows these guys, just stop complaining. Here's a way to do it. Move on.
They still need some software to run in their container.
But it could be open embedded. It could be it doesn't have to be a distro, right?
Or not a general purpose distro,
Right.
or OE or Nixos or something.
So maybe we should I can bring this up in LEG and I can say here's the answer for everyone who keeps asking about this and bringing it up all the time. Just someone go and do enough work to do open embedded or something in a container.
So
Move on.
we have in Metal Linaro, we have IOP32 support. We can build a file system, but for the testing thing, the first bit that we noticed that crashes is the SSH daemon.
no one needs one of those though.
So we're working on a proof of concept and see where that goes, but I'm on the implementation end, so someone has to say, this is stupid, we're not going to do that, or give us tons of money and we will continue doing it. So if you can push on LHG that either give us a shit ton of money or stop
Yeah.
talking about it.
There's
Here's the
at least
LEG
some member
guys.
companies.
So
Not on camera.
Right.
if
So-
doing the Docker scenario,
The
how
Docker
does-
scenario.
It's a bad movie. That's direct to TV right there.
how would that play for software that's not 64-bit safe? Would that still be a
It's
suitable
30
scenario?
It's a 32-bit container. As far as it's concerned, it lives in a 32-bit world, right?
What's the syscall interface for this? Is it the 32-bit syscall interface, the 64-bit syscall interface, or some...
It's a new one, isn't it? No, I think there's a new set of.
So I know on x86, Debian, they're very reluctant to enable x32 because they're worried about the attack surface of the syscalls. It's a sort of weird hybrid
It's
thing.
exactly
It's
the
lots of
same
opportunities to
thing.
fuck
It's
up.
another duplicated syscall.
Yeah.
You have to take care of.
But I think in the case of Fedora today, someone recently educated me on this. I didn't realize. I think apparently we turned that on in Fedora as it is for x32. So by precedent, there we would do the same. You guys do as well, right? So even though it's an attack surface thing, everybody's doing it for x32. Therefore, we'll do it on
The
AR64.
attack surface argument's paranoid. It's because there was one.
Yeah, one
bug
time.
Found in one syscall, and everyone went, oh no, we better just tear it all out. Like, whatever.
So the point is, people will turn those on. There'll be a new set of syscalls, and it actually all works. So I think it's probably the best.
I mean, considering that the old 64 syscalls are already a much smaller subset, it should be fairly clean.
This gives you something in the next few months, and then if someone has a huge, and I mean a huge check they want to come with, then
It's a lot of work.
Then you'll make sure it comes to us.
depends how many zeros there are.
We like lots.
We like few ones as well, It's
Left of the decimal. Don't need one. It could be any integer larger than 0. Picky.
What floating point encoding do you prefer?
Was that the last thing?
Yeah,
We've run over.
but there's no one here after us, so we can talk as long as we
But
wish.
maybe there are other
Well, we
solutions.
could, or we can stop.
I'm overdue for another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a
I've got a
mixed
smoking
proposal
bottle.
for same thing from MIPS as well, right? From KVM or somebody. This ILP32.
Yeah, MIPS has several different.
Oh,
APIs.
several. MIPS has about 38 ABIs.
And they just add a new instruction if it's not good enough.
They'll take a couple away.
That's right. That's right. We just changed the
They've just
pipeline.
realised how fucked they are.
But I mean, it's going to be a coding app. ILP30. SSH given is dying, you know why? Because it affects
We're going to try try a CH root and debug it, but that's what it was like. Yeah, we have it well. SSH is done. Like, yeah.
They have their own. They have their own configured guest, and that's
So,
where your case.
If
Yeah.
you've
So it
got
needs
a,
a different triplet.
if you've got a file system code, can you send Marcus Shawcroft a copy of that, please?
It's on snapshot.linaro.org. It's part of our shadow.
What, the ILP32?
Yes.
Does it still need the ILP32 kernel?
Yes.
I do.
It should do.
It yeah, it needs the new syscalls.
It'll need
I was
the
going to say, you'll
it'll
need the
need the
kernel
patch,
as
yeah.
well.
What's
Because
what's the timeline for getting those upstream?
for getting what
For getting the are the syscalls in place yet? No. What's the time?
well, the patch, Catlin's happy with patset, but he won't pull it until
As a user.
until the binutils guys, sorry, not binutils, the glibc guys are happy with the patset.
Oh, that's fair.
But they're not happy with the patch set because they've got no way of running the test suites to validate, and the patch set's unmaintainable as it is at the minute. So it needs to be refreshed
Okay.
and then worked on, and then once they say they're happy, they don't necessarily have to pull it. Then Calton can pull it.
So I see why you wanted that.
So, yeah. Thank you. Beer.
We had such an architectural. Good.